welcome. Thanks for attending this conference, and especially excited to introduce Genevieve. Genevieve has a litany of experience in psychology and privacy as well. So it's really excited to get this viewpoint of the psychology behind AI chatbots from both a technical and psychological perspective.
Hi, everybody. So, my name is Dr. Genevieve Bartuski. I am a licensed psychologist here in the United States. I'm also chartered in forensic and cyber psychology with the British Psychological Society. And today I'm going to talk about the psychology of trust in AI companions. When I was doing the research for this, I've got to start with the caveat. There were some things that I found out that quite surprised me when I was doing sort of the history of the AI companions. So here's what we're going to go over today. We're going to talk about I'm going to go through the timeline. What surprised me is that the first AI chatbot started in the 1950s, which blew my mind. We'll talk about the Eliza Effect. We'll talk about the psychological and emotional dynamics of using chatbots, Fogg's personal design formula, which is what a lot of tech companies use to engage users. Dark patterns with AI, the impact on mental health, impact on social relationships, and then key takeaways. And then at the end, we'll have some questions. All right. So this is the timeline of chatbots for the 1900s. So the first one was a Turing test in 1950, and basically, it was your first chatbot. And what they discovered is that it can create the illusion that it's alive. So it's really interesting. And then the big one was in 1966, we had Eliza. Eliza was the first like real chatbot. And so this is just a quick overview. And you can see it was very slow moving for quite a while. And then all of a sudden, we hit the 2000s and it has just exploded. This is, again, timeline continued. I'm not going to go through all of these. You probably recognize a lot of them. Um, and then this is what some of the predictions for the future. I think these are when you're looking at the predictions for the future, like the stronger privacy controls and synthetic companion ethics, this is more of I'm hoping happens. This is being very wishful thinking on this. In some places there are huge movements for less controls on AI development. However, like the EU has their AI governance act that so they're trying to keep those ethical controls, the privacy controls on it. And so hopefully we'll move towards those global guidelines. But like always, technology is moving a lot faster than well, what's the word I'm looking for? Than the laws can catch up. Okay. So here's the Eliza effect. So this is really interesting. This was named after Joseph Weizenbaum. He was a researcher, he was a computer programmer researcher at MIT back in the 1960s, and he wrote the book Computer Power and Human Reason. And in it, what he did was he created really the first chatbot. And what he did was he created mock conversations and answers and then, programmed the computer to be able to respond. And what was interesting, and this is something that shocked me when I was doing the research, two things shocked me. First of all, they used Rogerian therapy, um, like they use Rogerian therapy as the basis for the chatbot. So basically, what that is, you have the unconditioned positive regard. This is something that as a therapist, I do with my patients, is that no matter what they tell me, I am there, I am listening to them, and I will, you know, just basically assume they're doing their best, and look at them with positivity. Uh, he wanted it to mimic empathy and understanding, and he wanted it to come across as authentic and transparent. And these are things that we still use in therapy that were drilled into our heads in grad school and in training and stuff like that, and stuff that I use in my everyday practice. Um, One of the other things I discovered when learning about the Eliza effect and what was going on with that fascinated me is that they made a second version of it and they called it Doctor with like all caps Doctor. And they shared it with some psychiatrists. So if you don't know, just very quickly, difference between a psychologist, which is what I am, and a psychiatrist. I went to grad school. Psychiatrists go to med school. I can do psychological testing, neurotesting, therapy. Psychiatrists essentially, not to minimize what they do, most of what they do is prescribe medications. So what was interesting is that when he shared this with some psychiatrists at state hospitals, the psychiatrists were like, "Great, we can prescribe the meds, and then the patients can talk to the computers." So fascinated me. I would love to like find more information about that. But basically, the Eliza effect is that people start forming emotional bonds with the computer. So as they're talking to it, the Turing test said that people would create the illusion of it being human, and then Eliza came along later, and it built on that idea that people are going to start forming bonds with this, which isn't that unusual. I mean, people form bonds with everything. I drove a 350Z for almost 15 years. I will tell you, I was very attached to that car. I named her. I still, I was very careful who I sold her to when I finally moved on from that. But yeah, so I mean, you do form emotional bonds with machines. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be though. So this is what it looked like. This is just a screenshot from it, which I thought was really interesting. And I love how it did actually say it is a mock Rogerian psychotherapist. Um, but I thought this was really cool. So here are some characteristics of the Eliza effect. Again, it's basically like where we attribute human like intelligence, empathy, understanding to a computer. And it's becoming even more prominent now because AI is getting more and more human-like as it's developing. So here are a couple of terms related to that. So anthropomorphism, and this is basically the fancy scientific word for the Eliza effect, where basically you're projecting those human traits onto machines. Then there's the illusion of understanding. So with that, people tend to overestimate a system's intelligence and ability to comprehend. And and one of the things too is that I'm seeing this in therapy with my clients. Um, people who have some difficulty, socializing or in social, maybe have some social anxiety. Um, I've seen them use chatbots as a form of socializing. They'll say, "Well, like the chatbot gets me." I'm like, "Oh gosh, it doesn't." But that's their experience. And the other thing is emotional, big fancy word, emotional attribution. So one of the things that's really important when I do therapy with clients is that they need to feel heard and supported. I was also a hostage negotiator as well years ago. That was one of the other things too that when you're, most people think hostage negotiators, you walk in like a used car salesman. It's actually not. Um, the first, like the basis of like any kind of crisis or hostage negotiation is that you do need to make the hostage taker feel supported, feel heard. Doesn't mean you agree, but that's so important for people. It's do you ever have that friend that you're just like, well, you hopefully it's not a friend if you have like this, but like you talk to somebody and they just never really hear you or understand where you're coming from or make no effort to do that. You're not going to want to hang out with that person. But, we tend to gravitate towards people who make us feel heard, make us feel supported, and do it without judgment. So this is a quote from Joseph Weizenbaum's book, which I was able to pull. One of it's very interesting, like, the whole Eliza effect completely blew his mind. He was not a psychologist. He was a computer programmer. I work with a lot of computer programmers. We operate differently, but it's great though. I enjoy it. It's kinda nice to see the different points of view. But one of the things he says here is what I had not realized is that extremely short exposures to a relatively simple computer program could induce powerful delusional thinking in quite normal people. I don't necessarily like his word delusional thinking, um, but he does really hit home the point, like how easy it is for just regular people to form bonds with a computer. one of the things that ChatGPT is facing now is that people say please and thank you to the AI. And it's actually causing ChatGPT to lose a lot of money because it has to analyze those extra words. And I'm guilty of that too. Like it just feels weird to ask, an AI for something or give it a prop and not say thank you for helping me. I've gotten better though. So these are just some more of in interacting with the chatbots, some of the psychological and emotional dynamics that happen. As you can see, the anthropomorphism that's there. That's one of the biggest things. So here are some other things that happen. There is a loneliness and need for safe interactions. So we all, as human beings, need to feel safe, and human beings are social animals. And so we need that social connection. So it's important to have those social connections and feel safe within those connections. And if somebody doesn't have that in real life, they're going to be more susceptible to engaging with the chatbots at an unhealthy level. Um, the next thing is that so then I also wanted to include two social theories here. So you have the attachment theory. And I'm not gonna go too deep into this because we could really go down a rabbit hole on attachment theory, but basically what it is that, we all have different ways that we attach to others. There's secure attachment, there's insecure attachment, and it's important to have, for secure attachment, that consistency and emotional support. You see this with kids who have, parents who are consistent with them, constantly there. Like you can see them developing differently than children who have insecure attachment, where, maybe parents are neglectful or they're not around or their needs aren't being met. And so this ties into the use of chatbots is because you do need to connect to others. And then the other thing, social penetration theory, what this is that the more you disclose to somebody, like if think about your friendships, like when you first meet somebody, you're just like very superficial, probably have talks like, oh, what do you do for work? How's this going? Um, but as you get to know the person, you start to share more about yourself. And then in turn, that person shares more about them. And that creates intimacy. And so one of the problems is with chatbots is there is this perception of intimacy, of closeness, but it's not real. Some of the other emotional dynamics that are happening is emotional responsiveness and reinforcement. One of the things that's really difficult with chatbots sometimes is they're almost like echo chambers. So they don't challenge you. They just validate your behavior, which you need that sometimes. 100%. You absolutely need to be validated in what you're feeling and your emotions and what's going on. But one of the things that happens in relationships is like you learn as you're going on. When I do therapy, I challenge my patients, my clients. Within interpersonal relationships, you challenge each other, you set boundaries, you navigate that stuff. There's a lot of communication going on. And in chatbots, it's more like just an echo chamber where it's like, yeah, you're great, and it says what it thinks you want to hear. And then the other thing is that chatbots are available 24/7. So, you're up in the middle of the night, you need something that somebody connect to. It's like, oh, there we go. I can just like hop onto the chatbots. So it's very and that the other thing too is that human beings, like, we tend to do things that are easier to get to, like that have less roadblocks. And so it's a lot easier to pick up your phone or hop on the computer and use a chatbot than it is to wait until morning or call somebody. I do see the chat going, and I'll check it at the end. Um, one of the things I wanted to bring into this is Fogg's persuasive, not pervasive, persuasive design formula. The reason that I'm bringing this in is because a lot of tech companies use this when designing their technology, because the idea is that you want people to be engaged and you want people to interact with it. And so this is just fancy academic for it, but basically behavior is going to equal motivation, ability, and a prompt. And so motivation is your desire to take action. Ability is how easy or difficult it is. And then the prompt, they formally call these triggers, but that's the cue or signal that initiates the behavior. And all three have to be present at the at the same time for the behavior to occur. And what they do when they in tech design is they have all this. Like they'll have like, things that trigger your motivation, and then they make it easy. It's like, oh, well, if you just do this, if you just accept our privacy practices, you can access this information. So there's a lot of this is built right into how technology is developed, specifically with social media as well. And I'm not going to go too far into that. We could totally spend another hour talking about this, but a lot of things to cover today. Um, and I know I'm throwing a lot at you. It was actually very difficult for me to sort of condense this down to 20, 25 minutes because there's so much that we can talk about and so many things that are really interesting and warrant further conversations. So, dark patterns and why this matters. This screenshot is from, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie War Games. It was from the early 1980s, with Matthew Broderick. And if you've ever seen it, it was really cool movie. And this was him prompting, I think it was called Joshua in the movie, the computer system. So I just used that screenshot because I thought it was really cool and relevant. Um, so one of the problems with chatbots is that it has the potential to being better than real life experiences. Because any relationship or social interactions, they can be messy. It can be hurtful. Our needs might not be being met. There might be communication breakdowns, and it's so much easier to just like if you have a chatbot. I mean, there are bots being developed for relationships now. Like you can have a relationship with a chatbot instead of a human being, and so it does have that potential for better than real life experiences, which really worries me for the younger generation, for the kids, um, because if they're growing up with this, as potential for them to, like, it being more involved with their lives, like, throughout their lifespan. But because AI learns from humans, it can also learn our not so good stuff as well. And so I just listed a couple of things here. It can mislead vulnerable users, escalate harmful ideation, it can cross into grooming, radicalization, criminal planning, uh, and all of that is very true. And that is quite a concern. And one of the things too is that I'm a real big advocate for is that I do see the potential for AI to be used. I use it myself. I'm not gonna lie. I can also see it being used in mental health and medical settings, but I think it's really important that it has oversight. And then the impact on mental health. And so I broke this up into mental health and the social impacts because I think it's important to have both. Um, and so here are some of the things that it can have an impact on when you start over relying on the use of chatbots in lieu of social interactions or something like that. So there's something called emotional avoidance. Um, and there are a lot of ways people avoid emotions. Some people will distract themselves, some people will just not deal with stuff. Some people will rely on substances. And one of the problems that happens when you avoid your emotions is that you can't grow through them. Like you can't move through them. So for example, grief, right? I'm just using this as an example, but it's so important that when you lose somebody or you have that loss, that you actually sit and experience that grief, because you have to experience the emotion in order to move past it. in order to move on from it. You have to be able to process it. And when you're not processing those emotions, I mean, that can cause, stunted growth, arrested development, stuff like that. Attachment to non-human entities. It creates something called parasocial relationships. Uh, Reduced self-efficacy. I think this is really important. One of the questions that I see getting asked quite a bit is AI making us dumber? Uh, and I don't know that it is, but I've not done the research or looked at it, but I can see how AI will be used in lieu of decision making. Like, okay, I've got a really difficult decision to make, not sure what I want to do. Let me go ask AI. Or I need to condense all of this information and figure out what's going on. I'm going to ask AI to do that. And so it can reduce your ability to do that and to make those decisions for yourself. One of the things that is coming out now in psychology, in mental health practice, is that there's more AI being used to help write your notes and to keep clinical documentation, stuff like that. And some of it's great. I've looked at it. Some of it's really good. It's really nice to have, especially like to organize stuff. Um, but my fear is that the newer clinicians and the newer folks getting trained with AI being part of that is they don't learn the underlying reasons behind it. They don't understand like why it's this way or why you have to do it this way, or when you're um one of the things we do as psychologists is we do psychological testing. So when I learned, God, I sound old saying this, but when I learned, we learned how to do everything by hand, and the reason we did so that we could understand what that test was testing, how it was being how it was being used, what the results mean. And when you have AI just being able to calculate all that for you, I worry that they're not going to have that same depth of knowledge or understanding about it. I did mention the stunted emotional processing, and that's just very important. And I like what it says here that chatbots don't truly empathize, so they can give you support, but they don't really help you process your emotions. And you can process your emotions, like you can go to therapy, you talk to your friends, like however you do it. But it's really important to be able to process those emotions. And then there's the increased isolation. Again, human beings, we are social animals. If you've ever had there's even like I won't go too deep into the neurobiology of it, but if you've ever had a child, you probably remember the doctors or the nurses saying to you to hold the baby kangaroo style, we're skin to skin, and that contact and the hug, because that connection actually creates something called oxytocin in the brain. And you need that oxytocin for emotional development, especially, in babies. It also helps regulate your emotions. It helps you feel better. And it's so important to be able to have that and for your brain to be able to process to create that. And you're not creating oxytocin from using, well, at least I don't think you are. I'm not, I haven't seen any research on this that says otherwise. Uh, in interacting with chatbots, you may be hitting those dopamine receptors, but you're not creating that oxytocin, which is what you need. And so here are a couple of the impacts on. Take a look at the time. Oh, we're. I just realized that we were like at time. I'm so sorry, but here is the very quickly the impacts on interpersonal relationships. Reduced communication, avoidance vulnerability, displacement of human bonding. Again, these things are very important, absolutely needed for our well-being. One of the things that I don't see mentioned enough is the not experiencing life. I think it's so important to have life experiences, to go out and do things, to have adventures.